Race fans, it's time to buckle in and listen to the fastest hour in racing radio. Your driver is a multi-time NASCAR winner and Hall of Famer Mark Martin. We cover racing, grassroots, history, we bench race, we talk life, and most importantly, we smash the loud pedal. It's time to turn some laps on the Mark Martin Podcast.
Episode number 29 of the Mark Martin Podcast, and we're going to go into the year 1988, the first full year with Roush Racing. Before we do that, though, make sure to head on over to markmartinpod.com, markmartinpod.com. Get all of the old episodes. Make sure you hit that listen button and subscribe on your favorite player. Give us that 5-star rating, and make sure to visit markmartinpod.com. But, Mark, we're going to talk 1988, the first full year of NASCAR racing with Roush Racing. We've talked and touched a little bit about it, but let's go in depth. 1988 here on the Mark Martin Podcast.
So, 1987 kind of leads us into 88. Basically, Jack had $2 million committed to that season, was going to run 2 full seasons. That's $2 million of his own money. He was going to commit to racing 2 seasons, even if he didn't have a sponsor, just with the backing that he had from Ford and his personal money to start a team with. So, obviously he got Steve Meal, and he got Robin Pemberton. So young guys who maybe hadn't proven themselves yet, but in my eyes were a super team to start with. I was truly excited to be able to work with Steve and Robin. Young guys, really smart, had worked at Petty's and been around NASCAR for long enough that they were ready to really come into their own. So it was an exciting time. We got the first car built. The first car was an intermediate car. Got it built in time for the last race of 87 at Atlanta. And so, and we took it down and tested at Atlanta on Monday and Tuesday after the Atlanta race there in November. And it went well. We were just, building a trailer and building a organization of, a building in Pleasant Garden. Well, not Pleasant Garden. That's where Steve lived, but Liberty, North Carolina, which was outside of Greensboro, close to Randleman, where Petty Level Cross, where Petty Enterprises was, and all. So there was an awful lot of work to do, and Jack had told Steve and Robin that we were going to run a limited schedule initially. And so when we got ready to make the announcement, when they landed Stroh's, and so we had an press announcement, had to press up there to Liberty in January. And made the announcement. When Jack made the announcement that, we'd signed Stroh's for a sponsorship, he also told the media that we'd be running the full schedule, which was news to poor Steve and Robin, who, were just not prepared for all that. There was just so much work to do, and we had, half a dozen employees. Is all you had at that time. So one car finished, and a super speedway car being finished, and a Richmond car, short track car, in the works. So long story short, we went to Daytona, and we qualified 24th, I think, on time, something like that. And which, was, I would say we were a little bit disappointed. Our speedway car we thought was really nice. We'd been to the wind tunnel with it. We thought we should do pretty darn good. when looking back on it, that was better than we felt like it was. It was good enough in the 125 qualifying race. They wadded up. The heroes wadded up and wrecked in front of me, and I got involved in it. Tore the car up. So the only car, our backup car was our Atlanta car. Whew, you talking about a dog slow race car. That thing was really slow. So somehow or another, back then you had to run a fan, an engine fan, a mechanical fan. And so the procedure was, when it went to qualifying time, you put a flat fan on for qualifying. And of course that was less horsepower because it was flat. We ran a fan shroud and everything. Well, for some reason, the car was so slow that for some reason, Steve and Robin let Jack try to race a flat fan. So we made 15 laps before we melted her down, blew her up. So we left Daytona in a hole. But, the guys worked really, really hard building a team, building a transporter, building outfitting a building, and getting cars built. They built a really nice short track car. We ran fairly decent. I don't really remember anything spectacular until we got to Bristol, which is about the 5th or 6th race of the season. We're running, we're only 3 of us on the lead lap, Bill Elliott, Jeff Bodine, and myself. And Bodine turns Elliott around with 5 or 10 laps to go. And when he does, Steve calls pit, which was, of course, pit, put 4 tires on. And so when he calls pit, I'm like, okay, yeah, here we go. Jeff Bodine stays out. And of course, Bill Elliott's going to pit because there's only 3 of us on the lead lap, and he just spun out. So he's going to be behind us if we come and get 4 tires. But Jack don't get it. He's been road racing. He's new to that, and he don't get it. And he says, why? And, Jack intimidated all of us, intimidated Steve. Steve called the races, Steve Mill, and brilliant guy. But he let Jack intimidate him, and we stayed out. And of course, Bill came and got 4 tires and won the race. There's no question in our mind that if we would have come and got 4 tires, we would have won the race right out of the gate. But after that race, we weren't in contention to win any other races. We ran fair, not great, broke a lot of engines. We ran a lot of setups that were not ideal. We built Banjo Matthews cars, rear steer cars, because we were a Ford team, and that was the established car at the time, although front steer cars were pretty prevalent at the time, which drove probably a little bit better. They weren't nearly as squirrely and loose getting into the corners, but our cars were rear steer cars, Banjo Master cars, because Banjo was a kind of a Ford guy, and we were Ford. Ford was our main backer, one of our main backers, and we ran the wrong springs. We'd run a pair of 1500s and a pair of 350s at a place like Atlanta or Bristol or whatever, and that really wasn't ideal. That was one of the Ford engineers was high on that at the time, and so we were using his logic for most of the season. Well, late in the season, we got to running more like an 1800 and a 1200. And 350 and a 300, or a 400 and a 350 across the back. Much better, especially for the long run. It seemed like the equal springs would qualify fast. or turn a few laps fast, but we really give up on the long run. And the split spring setup seemed to stay on the tires longer and hold its speed for a lot longer. So, the year was a year of building and learning. Uh, Steve and Robin and I all learning about things and trying to get our feet under us. We did finally get a pole at Dover, of course, my favorite racetrack. So we did finally get a pole. So that was a big success for us. But we really broke a lot of motors. And I was in a few wrecks and we had a few issues here and there. And we performed probably well for a new team, but not up to our expectations. The thing that you have to keep in mind is we had a Yankee owner in a southeastern sport at the time that was just starting to sort of bloom into more of a national sport, but it was really so we had a Yankee owner who may or may not have been looked upon the same as if our owner would have been a good old boy. We had a driver from the Midwest, which may or may not have been looked upon as favorably as if it was a good old boy from the Carolinas. And heck, Robin and Steve were both from the Northeast as well. So, we had that going for us or going against us. I'm not going to use that as an excuse. I'm just saying that, we were semi outsiders, number one. Number two, it was the day and age of no technical alliances, no sharing of information. Jack was new to building NASCAR engines. Really, he had done some work, but nothing on this scale. His engine expertise and super success was in road racing at this time. So he was sort of transitioning from being a major force in road racing to getting involved in NASCAR. So, it was a steep learning curve for all of us, for Jack with the engines, for Steve and Robin and myself. We were trying to figure out where we fit into all this stuff. I had finally gotten with a race team with some people on it that were more knowledgeable than I was in a lot of areas, and was trying to figure out how I could help Steve and Robin without being resented. People in NASCAR didn't really like people from the outside coming in and telling them how they needed to be doing things. And that was always a challenge and one of the fears in the early years for guys like Trickle and myself and Rusty and whoever, was that, yeah, we knew a lot about racing and race cars, and we needed some help from established NASCAR guys to help us adapt and implement, some of that to NASCAR. And most of the old guys, old guard in NASCAR, didn't want to hear anything from the driver. They wanted the driver to shut up and drive the race car. So I joined a gym first thing in January and started lifting because I knew I wasn't going to be in the shop as much, because I knew that Robin and Steve didn't want to be told what to do by some race car driver all the time. And I knew I wasn't going to be the boss. I'd always pretty much almost always been the boss of my car until this point. And I was trying to figure out how I integrated into this new system with these really brilliant people, Steve and Robin and Jack Roush. Where do I fit? Where's my contribution? So I threw myself into physical fitness, number one. And of course, I hung out with Steve and Robin, and we talked race cars all the time. And I made my suggestions, and Steve was really open to me having input on the setups themselves. But as far as the bodies went, aero went, I had to kind of grow into that, gain their confidence, and build on some success to be able to have more influence on my race cars as we went forward. So, Steve was the same way. He was learning where his place was with Jack, and I really hate it that we didn't win Bristol, that we could have won Bristol, but I understand Steve rethinking his pit call because he was questioned by the owner. And obviously, heck, if it would have been the wrong call, which it couldn't possibly have been the wrong call, the worst case scenario would be that we would have run third. Though, as it turned out, on the pit call, Steve had me stay out. Then he explained to Jack why we were pitting. Well, Bill came in and got his 4 tires and came out, lined up in second. Then the next lap, Steve pitted me and put 4 tires on, so I lined up in third. And of course, I ran second to Bill because Bill started in front of me back in the days of single file restarts. I mean, it was a slam dunk the way we were running to have pulled off that win. But Steve could have lost his job. I mean, we were all pretty timid toward Jack at the time, and afraid of him. And I was afraid of Jack for 10 years. I'm really bad afraid of him for 5 or 6 years until he just intimidated us. He intimidated me. I'm sure he intimidated Steve to some degree, maybe not as much as he did me. I was really grateful for the opportunity to be able to race like that. We finished somewhere around 15th in the point standings. It was a pretty disappointing season for us. We had higher expectations, but we just got off behind from the very beginning. We just didn't have the organization, the people, and we had a lot of a steep learning curve for our first season, and it was really overwhelming, to try to race the full schedule against the best of the best when we weren't completely and totally prepared for it. So toward the end of the season, Jack actually let out the he leaked out that he might be looking for a driver, or that my job wasn't secure, or whatever it was very it really shocked me. It never crossed my mind that of course I had signed a 5-year contract with him. Paid. I didn't even get paid part of the purse the first year. I got a $75,000 salary to race the full Winston Cup schedule at that time, and so I signed up for no money. And then the second year, my pay was on the contract was just 40%, 35 or 40% of the purse. May have been 35% of the purse only. No personal services, no salary, no nothing. So, I don't know. It just never dawned on me that I could be on the hot seat. And I don't think I was. I think Jack did that. Jack was a shrewd, ruthless guy, and he was fairly cold and hard to get to know at that time. And I think Steve and Robin would back that up. And I think he did that to motivate me, um, to push me. And so anyway, of course, nothing came of it other than my grief and loss of sleep over it, but nothing came of it. But that was one of the things that I really remember about that fall. As we started going into the fall, we started running the spring setups, the split spring setups, which really started to bring us around. We started really staying on the tires longer, and being stronger, deeper into the races. Stuff started kind of showing some promise, and then we started building our first Laughlin front steer car. We started numbering cars. The first car we built was that Atlanta car, was number 1. So it JR1, JR2, 3, 4. The 10th car we built was a Laughlin car, front steer car. And we will talk extensively about JR10 in the upcoming episodes, 1989 and 1990. And JR10 actually will be discussed all the way through the 93 season. For some reason, it became sort of a legendary car for us at the 6-car team. But we started building that car. So that was the beginning of transitioning toward front steer cars, which was a good move for us. Cars drove better, and we were getting on the right spring setup stuff, and we really the only thing we had to face looking toward 1989, the following season, was we were going to have to deal with a body change. And we really didn't recognize at the time that we started that initial body change that it was significantly worse for downforce than the 88 body style. And so this was going to present a challenge for us because as you'll find out over the next 3 or 4, 5 seasons, it was all pretty much the same body shape. 89 going forward for, I don't know, 5 seasons or so, 6 seasons, fairly the same body shape. So we wound up being faced with challenges of making downforce. It was easy to make downforce. We didn't have to try. We could follow the rules and make really nice downforce cars with the 88 T-Bird. But 1989 put us to work. I look forward to the next podcast because 1989 and 1990 are the two. 1989 sets the foundation and puts us on fire and puts us on track to be a championship contender and to be a mainstay in Winston Cup racing. 1989 really sets the foundation. 1988, we had a lot of stuff to build and a lot of stuff to learn. 1989, we had more people. We were able to add more people. We were able to start with cars that we already had and start improving on things rather than just build things and trying to get things together and get them to the racetrack and whatnot. So we got some fun stuff coming up. 88 was a grind for sure. It was a grind for everybody involved. But as we went through the year, my physical fitness started to take shape. And, just as the race team was maturing and getting stronger, I was as well from a physical standpoint. So I was building the foundation for what in the future would become a advantage for me and for the six car on the physical fitness side.
Tell us about, as you're setting the foundation of 1988, you're also doing the Busch Series with Bill Davis. You had a handful of races over there. Tell us about what was going on over at Busch.
Well, yeah, see, in 87, Bill built his first race car, built an ASA late model, and we did that, and then he started building a Busch car for 19. That was in 87. So he started building a Busch car for 88. So Jack was willing to let me drive for Bill and get some additional experience. And I didn't have a Busch car to drive, so this was going to enable me to run some more races and learn some things. And so Bill, built his first Busch car, and of course, with Bill, I was able to direct, give the direction of the car, who built the chassis, where we, what setups, what springs we ran, all that kind of stuff. I was able to have input and give direction on, so that was really cool. And it was kind of the same thing. Bill and I built a foundation for his car. We used 06 for the first year there in 88. We managed to get with Danny Bumpus, and Danny was able to hook us up with Carolina Ford Dealers sponsorship, which was really, really awesome. What a great sponsor, especially living right there in the Carolinas. It was North and South Carolina Ford Dealers. So they got behind us and did some advertising, which was really good for me. Used our car and used me in some TV ads and print ads and stuff. It was really a good deal for us. There again, we ran, okay, pretty damn good, but our foundation was being built for the following season. 1989 is when we really land on our feet and really, start to kick ass. With Bill there in 88, we still ran the V8 engine just like I did in 87. Didn't have the V6s yet, although the Ford V6 was in the works and coming. I remember talking about Jack and how he intimidated me. I really liked the way Jack showed Steve and Robin and how to build the exhaust pipes. So you had to smash the exhaust pipes underneath the frame rails because they came out below the frame rails, so the cars. So you smashed them down. Well, Jack was an engineer and he was smart as hell. He just said, well, here's how you do that. You make a cone. You make the pipe gets bigger as it smashes so that the volume of the pipe stays the same and it flow stays the same. It was really cool. So I showed Bill, went to Bill's shop, showed Bill, and we built pipes like that for the Busch car as well. That got back to Jack. Jack called me up and tore my ass off for it so bad that I wound up crying because, dude, all I wanted to do is do good. All I wanted to do is be a good racer. All I wanted to do is win races. All I wanted to do is be approved of, and, he tore my ass up for like I was, stealing and spreading, secrets, his speed secrets all over the garage and everything else. It really hurt me. It really, really did hurt me. But Jack, he gave me lots of spankings the first several years that I raced. He was pretty tough. He was pretty tough on me. Uh, he didn't trust drivers. He didn't trust me. Um, he wanted to make sure he kept me down and kept me, you know, sort of. I felt like he wanted to keep me under his thumb, and so it was tough. It was a tough year. '88 was a tough year. It was a tough year. We had some fun with Bill's car. We had some fun with the 6 car. Steve and Robin were a joy to work with, and we had some fun, but God, did we have frustrations. Oh, unbelievable frustrations. It was a very difficult year. Not having Technical Alliance, not having anybody to show you how to do, you know, anything, having to figure it out on your own it was a challenge.
Tell us about that sponsor, Stroh's Light. You ever get an extra case of beer every once in a while?
Yeah, I got beer, got plenty of beer, which wasn't any good for me because I hadn't quit yet. In '88, I was trying to keep drinking in check because I had this, finally, after all these years, I had this opportunity, the one that almost made me faint when I shook hands with Jack Roush, the one that allowed me a chance to, realize my dreams, work with Steve Meal, Robin Pemberton, and possibly race for a win in NASCAR Cup Series. So I really tried to keep drinking in check. But over the years, especially after the brutal, failure of 1983, I had developed demons. I was very resentful or bitter about what had happened in NASCAR and the fact that I'd lost my entire career and the fact that I had to go back late model racing and start from scratch, not where I left off. Didn't get to start anywhere near where I left off and left there. I had to start from scratch. The days of free cars are over from Ray Dillon, those kind of things. It was just I had developed sort of deep down resentment and sort of bitterness at this time, and so I dealt with those things quietly and personally, but they influenced the way I acted some. And so this was a time when I really tried to I had gotten a little bit more wilder and crazier with the alcohol thing, and it was time to take a good hard look at that and say, keep it in check or risk losing your opportunity. So I tried to keep it in check in 1988.
All while having a beer sponsor on your car.
There's nothing wrong with having a beer or 2 or 3 or 4. There's nothing wrong with that. But, some people just don't know how to act. And, I was one of those guys that every so often would forget how to act. And that was what we needed to avoid. Well, as it turned out, I didn't feel successful enough at that and decided New Year's Day, 1989, was the day that I would put it behind me for a lifetime. And so I quit. I got New Year's Eve was the last drink that I had.
Well, we're going to get into what was a phenomenal year in 1989 in the next episode of the Mark Martin podcast. Good things are to come. We're going to have a lot of fun. Some really good years coming up here in the next couple of years, right, Mark?
Yeah. 2 really, really, really good years. The next 2 years, very important. Went from a struggling little racer to within a whisker of Winston Cup champion, all in the course of a couple years here. So these next 2 years are going to be fun to talk about.
All right, so that wraps up episode number 29 of the Mark Martin podcast, year number 1988. Again, make sure to hit markmartinpod.com, markmartinpod.com. Hit and subscribe on all the different players. Leave that 5-star rating. And follow on social media at Mark Martin Pod.
Thank you for subscribing and listening to the Mark Martin Podcast. Remember to give us a 5-star rating in your app store. Connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Mark Martin POD. The Mark Martin Podcast is a production of the Accelerated Podcast Network.